Jennie, thanks for joining.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So pumped that you could make it. I'd love if you could just maybe start out and give an overview of what life was like when you think about pipeline creation, finding opportunities, trying to get in there at the right moment. What was that like before you all signed up at Pursuit? What were you doing?
Sure. So, as many of you probably would also be able to determine, Adobe is a known company. Oftentimes, I find our largest challenge is people sort of know us based on how they sort of entered working with Adobe, right? So oftentimes that's PDF. That could also be Photoshop. That could also be if someone has been in the commercial space, it could be web modernization or analytics or any other way, right? But I think oftentimes one of our biggest challenges is people have a preconceived notion. And so it has always been very time consuming for us to identify stakeholders that are in other parts of the business and make that quick introduction with respect to how we relate to their business. And we have seen just the increase in speed as far as the research that we're doing to find new personas and then the suggestions that Pursuit provides that contextualize how to reach out to those folks has been the biggest uptick for us in working together.
And so, I know there's a couple of really great use cases. One is around WCAG. So, for anyone who's not super familiar, Jennie, feel free to chime in here. Well, actually, you'd be better suited to do it. What is WCAG, and what are sort of some of the things that public entities have to do now?
Sure. The Federal Department of Justice passed a mandate several years ago with a deadline of originally April 2026 that has been extended to April of 2027. But it was mandating that all state, city, county, and education entities needed to have accessible web presence prior to that April deadline. And originally, and even still sometimes, folks thought that that meant website, right? So like your website needs to be tagged and accessible. But as many of us know, government is very document heavy. When you interact with the DMV, if you have, some sort of case that is filed with the court system, all of that is in PDFs, either the action that you need to take, or if you're going to pull down sort of your record, all of that's very document heavy. And what we found was there was a huge gap where some states had hundreds of thousands or millions of documents dating back to the 80s and 90s that all need to be tagged and accessible in order to meet that mandate. And fines for inaccessibility were mounting at the 75 to 100K per incident. So very costly to fix that. So,
And that fine is the DOJ fine, right? There's also the risk of other lawsuits that are out there as well.
I think we can all agree too that that's like an awesome mandate. Like that is beneficial for everybody to be able to have readable documents. Can you talk a little bit about how the go-to-market strategy was to identify things that weren't digitized or entities that weren't digitized yet, so you knew who to target before Pursuit?
So again, I think that the one of the biggest gaps were there's a lot of people that in government sort of align with that charter, right? So you can think about webmasters, but also CIO, also accessibility lead, perhaps
Yep.
even the director of health and human services or somebody else. Like there's a lot of people that may have a stake in that, in that issue. And so when we started talking to Pursuit, what knocked our socks off and what we really thought was the differentiator was that the tool was able to go through and assess and say, like, this webmaster has, published this blog post about accessibility. And so here is messaging that would align with that person. And then immediately you can go to this IT manager is also talking about accessibility from a different perspective, and sort of go all the way down the line and conduct that research in minutes instead of probably days, right? Or weeks.
Yeah, totally. And there was an example, I think a couple of weeks ago that in a city council meeting, and this is the point, everyone always talks about being multi-threaded, Jennie, and I know we've talked about that in the past too, but one way this shows up in with a city is there's all the different departments, and oftentimes each department controls their section of the website. And so, I think what the example that came up a couple weeks ago was there was a person running libraries for a city who was like trying to do this WCAG thing for the whole city, and so now you find out that like there's one department that it was the library that wanted to set this up, and then that can cascade over, and and then you're like working up into IT, you're working across into all the other departments. So it's just kind of a sticky thing to wrangle. So I think that's a phenomenal example. Did you have anything else on that? I was going to ask about business licenses.
No, go ahead. I think that's great.
And another one, Jenny, like, could you just talk for a second about the business license initiative and some of the stuff that you all are thinking about as it relates to that one?
Yeah, so the best example off the top of my head is that the state of West Virginia the governor announced reciprocity for barbers and beauticians who have licenses in other states. So if you're coming in from a state that neighbors West Virginia, like Pennsylvania or Virginia, you'd be able to practice in West Virginia, and that increases their revenue. They're able to tax and conduct business there. If you go to their website, it is a entirely paper-based process with PDFs that are static PDFs, right? So they're not even forms that you can enter. You have to print it, you have to fill it in, and then you have to mail it with a check. And we were able to surface that very quickly, again, across multiple other entities and states, but and go back to these folks and provide them an example of, if we were to digitize this for you, you would be able to get a response in minutes rather than a week or two that might be wrong, right? Because again, you have the right technology, it can make sure that you're filling in all of the parts of the form that need to be filled in, and somebody doesn't miss something. Because I don't know about you all, but I've mailed paper forms and I'm like, did I even get that thing right? So
did they even get it right?
So again, It's a win-win, right? Because you've got people that now can get an incremental piece of revenue for their livelihood, and the state can see some additional revenue on their side as well. So it's a win-win across the board. And Pursuit has been really helpful with helping us, again, look at like paper-based process and where there are some needs to digitize.
Yeah. So I think one way that we've talked about this, Jenny, is like if you were conceptually as a sales leader, if you everyone knows that doing research is great, right? Like every sales leader, I think, believes that. It's just a matter of like, is there enough hours in the day to do it at scale? And I think that's something that what we're trying to educate folks about is actually that research can now be done in seconds, and you can do it across your entire TAM. Every AE can have it done across their entire patch. And so now you know who's actually in market, who's got budget. You know that there was a leadership change. You know who the library leader is, who the director of IT is, who run public works, permitting, licensing, all those sort of things. And so all that homework gets compressed down. And so you can actually now, as a seller, spend more of your time with the customer, which is how every sales leader wants it to run. Jenny, what would be killer is, I don't want you to share anything top secret that you'd have to kill us over. But what are you comfortable sharing just in terms of like at the end of the day, the business impact that you all have been able to see in the couple months, I guess couple quarters that we've been working together?
Sure. So we signed in January. That's our fiscal year starts in December. So that's right about at the beginning of our fiscal year. And we've seen an uptick in pipeline year over year of about 5.2 million over last year. That's about 50% higher than it was last year. So
Wow.
I think it's substantial. And again, I think it's really the time savings around researching. It's even made us smarter in other ways. So the tool actually surfaced something that came into my inbox, a very small county that was talking about accessibility in WCAG. And, I clicked right to where in the video at this county meeting they were talking about it. And it was interesting to hear them talk about the problem, right? Because it was a way for us to check that our positioning does align with what these folks are facing. But it also surfaced this county had made a decision to go with a different technology, and they talked about what price they were going to pay and what they were getting for that. So it was even providing some market intelligence for us around, what our competitors were doing that we wouldn't have seen. There's no way I would have seen this
Right.
county meeting any other way. So it's really great for that too.
Yeah, awesome. And the kind of the public records requests that sit underneath that give you expiration dates and things. It just all all compounds into like helping your team be more productive. And I would argue that's a win for everybody. That's a win for governments who are able to have more compliant websites, right?
Citizens.
Like it's a win for your team. Like sellers, you know, they make more money because they're more productive. That helps everyone hit their numbers. So I think it's a great thing for everybody, and really appreciate you joining, Jennie, and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, happy to. I'm excited to see what success we can see since we've seen such growth in 6 months.
Well, let's stick around, and you'll see all the stuff that just gets sent out the door in our summer release too. But thanks for joining.
Thanks, Jennie.